twisting through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting that its story must be told.
Hey everybody, and you are listening to the Soberful podcast, and I am here joined by Sarah Gillespie. Hi Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, second time.
Yes.
I think it's the second time. Probably going to do more than this. So Sarah wrote and recorded the song that you just heard when you listened to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Okay. I am primarily a singer-songwriter. I have 5 critically acclaimed albums and quite a few EPs. And for the last 15 years, I've been touring all over Europe and the UK and playing in the United States, performing with my band and solo, my own original music. I also am an expressionist painter, and I have a book of poetry published by Oxford Beatnik Poetry Press.
Cool. So when we started the show and we needed some intro music, I was like, well, I only know one musician, and you luckily had this most perfect piece of music, because the line that we use in it is just like perfect at the beginning of the show. I can't remember I can't remember it, but you know which one.
Came to in the morning or something like that.
That's it. Came to in the morning. Something needed warning.
Yes, yeah. I can't remember exactly. Yeah.
So we're here today because we're going to have a conversation about belonging and identity. And this is like, I just feel, so we met when we were 16, and we have had many adventures together. Many adventures, and now we're having the adventure of being mothers and women who are in their 50s, and that it just feels like that happened so quickly. I feel like we were young and now we're old. I just feel like that happened so quickly. And we've just been having, I think, one conversation over several decades, and it just twists and turns and all this kind of stuff. And we've been having this back and forth conversation for ages on WhatsApp. And we were like, oh, we should talk about this because it's so relevant to the process of getting sober and sobriety, and so relevant to being and becoming an artist. And you said something, so identity, because I was thinking about this, like, identifying as an alcoholic or not identifying as an alcoholic, or identifying as somebody who drinks, as a drinker, what kind of, are you a beer drinker or are you a sophisticated wine drinker? Like how we identify. And you said something really interesting about identity and what it actually is.
So my definition of identity is how we perceive other people perceiving us.
I just need to like sit with that, because so when you're on your own on an island, you just are.
Yeah. So if you're alone on a desert island, identity markers have no currency because they require an onlooker, and the hall of mirrors that creates identity or reinforces identity isn't there. It is to do with how we view others viewing us. And so in my mentoring practice, when I am mentoring creative women and songwriters and artists, this whole issue can be really, really helpful to a degree, and it can be very, very prohibitive, and can completely clog the arteries of organic expression. And I think that when you and I have been talking in the past, we just saw parallels about how do you go from being an alcoholic who is using alcohol to anesthetize your feelings to being a sober human being, and what does that entail? And the same thing, similar things can be applied to some of the people I work with who have all this creativity inside them, and they just want to be an artist, which is very different from somebody who wants to be seen as an artist.
Oh, tell me about that.
So a lot of the women I work with have all this art bursting in them to get out, and they can't understand why the hell it isn't coming out of them. And so along the way, they might, flirt a little bit with the identity of being an artist. So that especially for sort of white middle class women who write songs and enjoy poetry, that might be, wearing ethnic prints, buying a few poetry books, like the collected, the best of E. Cummings, and like bohemian signifiers, and buy a lovely notepad, a moleskin notepad in the airport, and imagine yourself writing it and using kind of bohemian hashtags that kind of signify to others that you're of an artistic ilk. However, the real guts and glory of creating the thing is a whole different kettle of fish. And to do that, really, you have to be impervious to what it is you think other people think of you.
And that bit, impervious to what other people think about you, being free of the good and bad opinion of others.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that, because that's exactly what I do in sobriety.
Yeah.
That's the key to sobriety, is you have to get to a point where you do not take anything personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so interesting, those parallels.
I know. And I don't know, like, what percentage of your client base is women.
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah, because I like 95% of my clients that I work with mentoring are women, and I've been looking at the data and looking at so basically the data supports my anecdotal experience, which is that women are not creating songs and then putting them out in the world anywhere near how they should be, or assuming that they want to do it in the first place. In this country, in the UK, 82.7% of professional composers and songwriters are men, and overall there's like 95% of the music you hear in the public domain is written by men, which is really confusing because we have all these female superstars, but I'm on about writing it.
Katy Perry just had a single out called Women's World, which was all about women's empowerment and and it was written by like 8 men, one of who has been credibly accused of rape. It's like, it makes like, do you not think people can Google?
Well, people are not curious about it enough, but a lot of that kind of I'm a badass woman, empowered kind of Spice Girls kind of messaging is often written by men, and it's marketable and people enjoy it. But what I've noticed with the women I mentor is there is this tyranny of kindness that women occupy that totally prohibits their expression of things that they would rather not feel. And they have, I call it the like me filter. And I do think it's primordial partly with women, because for many, many centuries, our only agency in the world was to marry well. And to marry well and be a good mother, you had to be vanilla and nice. You had to be
likable.
To be likable. And to be likable, you don't want to be extreme in any way. You don't want to do anything too pungent or peculiar. And so this is an issue with women who are writing songs, because they're not drawing on the full palette of their emotions, and the stuff that you deal with, Veronica, in your work to do with like resentment and things like that. When these feelings are repressed and unconscious, they run the show.
Yes.
And they run the show. They are steering the ship, and they are incapable of intervening on them. So as obviously, we were just talking before we started recording this, but obviously not all artists are sober. However, I would argue that great art is made despite using alcohol and drugs, not because of it. And the process of creating art takes unconscious feelings and brings them out into the air to be heard, to be witnessed by the people. And in that process requires what we just said, being impervious to what you think might happen if you are visible emotionally, if you are 100% alive with all of the good and bad that you feel, about life, about your experiences.
Which is being who you really are.
Exactly.
And being who you really are is really terrifying
Very.
because of how we believe others perceive us, and how seductive that is, and how intoxicating. And it's also, I wonder, part of that is about being able to recognize each other, right?
Yes.
There's something about, we have to recognize each other,
Sure.
and we have to be in our groups, because we have to be in our groups to survive. And so there's something there about it's got out of balance.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that partly it's to do with the internet and social media. And I always use this term that comes from a feminist film theorist called Laura Mulvey. And she talks about women's to be looked atness, which is something you could argue exists in nature and is just been distorted out of all proportion now. And by the way, I would love to add that there is no one size fits all experience about this, because there are elements of, I'm not saying all identity is bad and fake and is just to signify to people. I think that for in many cases, it's so helpful. It can be a portal into being yourself, So if I'm working with somebody who thinks, I can't be an artist, that's just not, I can't be, that's a pipe dream. That's for other people, not me. And I encourage them to see themselves in that way. Then they have the confidence and they're like, yes, I do have permission. It's like permission, camaraderie, all of those things to be an artist. And that might be stuff like being on stage, having a website, recording, calling yourself an artist. That's all brilliant. The problem is if we get stuck in that, because you can get stuck in a zone where it's just a hall of mirrors, and it isn't being for real. And I mean, how would you say that echoes with your experience of going from drinking to not drinking to being as you are now?
It is very much about identity, because I really liked what I grasped in the 90s when we were doing our drinking is I don't know if you remember, there was a sort of like Wild Child, Amanda de Cadenet, like I don't remember that. It was like I wanted to be that. Like that was cool. I wanted to be seen as the party girl, always pushing things a bit, being edgy, all of that kind of stuff. And I really liked that identity. I liked, and you're completely, I liked being seen that way.
Yes.
Because I thought that, and again, I wanted to be seen that way because I believed that would make me happy. I guess. I mean, it doesn't really make sense when you examine it very closely. And then there is this sort of, I always call it, it's this no man's land bit where you realize you have to stop drinking, and you stop drinking and you're sort of nothing. Like, it's like this, like, it's a death. Like, it is a death of identity. Yeah. And it's like this, and there is absolutely the process of grieving. And I see this in a lot of my clients. I didn't have this, and I'll tell you why, is then, back in the day when I got sober, we don't use the word alcoholic so much, but I loved that identity of, oh, I'm an alcoholic, because it crystallized exactly what my problem was. Yeah. And up until that point, I'd spent many years trying to find what the problem was, and I couldn't find what the problem is. And you can't fix the problem unless you know what the problem actually is. So once I had like, oh, I'm an alcoholic, that all made sense. And I'm going to tell you, honestly, because I was 27, as you know, I loved that identity because it was also edgy. Yeah. And I always liked being, I always wanted to be different. Like, I didn't want to be like everyone else. Like, I always wanted to be like, I don't know if it was stand out. I liked that, because nobody I knew was a 27 recovered alcoholic. That was very different. I was a goth. You remember me when I was a goth, right? I always wanted that. So I clung to that identity for a long time. And I don't know if when we started having this conversation, but I realized like long years ago, it's not my identity. It's just part of my tapestry. It's just
Yeah.
something like in that I have to accept that I cannot drink alcohol, and
Mm-hmm.
I maintain my mental and emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
And what my philosophy of sobriety is, when you have, and I wonder how this fits with your process, when you have an alcohol problem, you leave yourself by degrees. And one day you wake up and you have this moment of clarity where you realize you're far away from who you really are. And sobriety is about the journey back to yourself.
Mm.
So for me, process is everything.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, part of this as well is about belonging and not knowing how to place yourself in the world.
Yeah.
And this again is like it's a metaphysical problem and an issue. And there is so much self-abandonment that goes on,
Yes.
and it shows up in different ways. And I have women I work with on songwriting and stuff that ranging from about 18 all the way up to 79 at the moment. I have one lady who's putting out her first single at age 79.
Oh God, love her.
Yeah.
Oh.
But there's also a lot of women who are sort of in their 40s who are like gone through life thinking, one day I'm going to write the book, one day I'm going to make the album, one day. And there'll be all sorts of caveats. It'll be, well, when I have the right
And the
kind
kids
of
are older.
bohemian space with the sanded down floorboards, or when I have enough childcare, or when I can go for 2 months and rent a windmill in Portugal. And of course, it's like holding the carrot in front of the face. And then you get to a point where you go, actually, I think I've been talking a load of crap to myself, because I've now been saying that for 15 years. And that's the moment where a lot of people end up coming to me, understanding that it isn't the lack of contacts. It's not the lack of time. It's not the lack of anything. There's something else at play that's stopping them. And it's a longing for belonging and a longing to leave legacy and meaning in the world as well. I mean, art provides people with that. You know, you get to scratch your autograph in the cosmos once you've released music.
What is that famous phrase that art is just a conversation through time? Or there's a famous...
Carl Jung said, and I love it, it's my favourite. Carl Jung said, art is human beings having a conversation across time and space.
Yes. Oh my God, that is... I could sit and think about that for about 3 days. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always have to think of like when I was in Sedona a couple of years ago, and you go to these caves that are like have all these drawings that are like 3,500 years old, and it's like the person who's etched these drawings of the buffaloes and the mountain skyline of the mountains, you know, the landscape and where the women are giving birth, and drawn all this out. It's a message, because it's like they've thrown a ball for 3,500 years, and then I catch it and go, look at that, look at the buffalo, look at the fox, look at the this, look at the that, and you're like, and then you throw the ball up, and it is about connection, you know.
Yes.
And that's why people crave to be creative. They crave it because they want to join in that conversation. And unfortunately, when Carl Jung said it's human beings having conversation across time and space, what he was really referring to was men having conversation across time and space. Because until recently, and women are not writing the novels, or not, they're not getting out, and they're not getting heard, and they're not in the public domain. And we're going through a process of changing that. But I definitely feel there's a lot of unconscious fear that is just prohibiting it. And a lot of that is locked into identity fear, you know? So it is a sticky issue, because on one hand, identity can be a really valuable thing that propels you from inaction to sort of doing something new. However, it can also, you can get stuck in it like quicksand. Because in what you're doing and what I do, we need to get to that point of being impervious.
Yeah.
To what we think other people think, because obviously you never know what the hell anyone thinks.
Yeah, and I'll tell you where it happens in the journey of sobriety, and then see if it makes any connections with your work.
Mm-hmm.
So in the process of sobriety, you stop drinking and you get some help and you do some things and blah blah blah. And what happens is every single person gets to the jumping off place, and the jumping off place is a cliff. And what I see most people when they get to the jumping off place is you have this incredibly profound realization that to continue, you have to be completely responsible for the experience you want to have in life. Completely responsible. Or you have to go back. And I remember getting to that position because it feels like jumping off a cliff, because it feels like you have to jump off a cliff blind and trust that you're going to be caught, and you can't see that. So you're like, which, you know, if you imagine doing that physically would be terrifying. You're told you will be caught, but you can't see that you're going to be caught. So it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I got to that and went, there isn't hard no. And then I looked back and went, even harder no.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I and really, it's really the kind of, it was the strength, I don't know what word to use, it was the enormity of going back was death for me. It was death.
Yeah.
I had no choice. It's like I go back, it's death. And I mean probably physically dying, but what I mean more is soul dying.
Yeah.
It would have led to physical death eventually, but soul death first.
Yeah.
So I had to jump, and I just had to pray that what I had, it's not just what I've been told by other sober people, it was what I came to understand in myself.
Yes.
That if I jump, I will be caught, and I jumped. And I want to tell you, it was terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was no other way for someone like me. There was no other way. I could not live any other way. And it brought me into a life of which I cannot even, it couldn't even describe. But it's interesting because you were a witness for all of that.
Yeah, I was. I'd love for the 16-year-old version of you that I met, who's this sort of sassy, beautiful, highly intelligent drug addict, to say to her what you've created for yourself in your life, because she wouldn't even understand it. She wouldn't be able to comprehend it in a million years.
Yeah.
But that whole analogy about the cliff, it's like that is exactly the same as what I deal with. And I think that what we're both talking about is like the call of the self, you know? It's the call of the self, and the fear that brings up is immense. And yet you have to not take action from the fear. How do you do that? You have to be in touch with something that's bigger than the fear, because fear is never going to go away.
Nope.
You know, and the people I'm working with, then I can't stop them caring about what other people think of them, or fearing that they might not have enough talent, or fearing visibility, or fearing public humiliation, or there's a smorgasbord of fears. But the desire to express themselves, to create art, and to be part of the conversation of human beings across time and space is bigger than the fear, you know? And honestly, one of my most talented mentees that I've ever worked with, who's a phenomenal human being and artist, had already made like 8 albums, and she started working with me. But they were all the Great American Songbook, you know, jazz songs and Cole Porter and stuff like that. And when she started working with me, she wanted to create an original body of work. And in her genre that she's in, all the musicians are virtuosos. They're phenomenal, like the best bass players, the best pianists, the best drummers in the world. And she toured all over the world. She's toured the United States endlessly. The fear that she bought, that came up for her, was so incredible. And she consistently refused to let it run her ship. And it was just, you know, a phenomenal thing to witness somebody as talented as her, like choosing to override it. And to the point, the day she went into the studio to record this album with the phenomenal musicians, she was in tears. And she was crying with fear.
Wow.
Because it's a thing. she also, I mean, apart from, another common thing is she has childhood trauma, and she had childhood trauma of being really badly bullied. So being visible and exposing your all the palette of your reality and emotions is vulnerable, and it's even more vulnerable for some people than it is for me, for example. But she was in tears saying, I'm just scared, and she went and she did it, and it's a phenomenal record, and it's being played all over the place, and she's touring it, and it's on my record label, Pastiche Records. But like, that's an example of somebody who had this very clear calling, and it's like, are you going to jump off the cliff, or are you going to go back? And she jumped, and many people don't.
Many people don't. There's several things I wanted to. The parallels are this is why we're having this conversation, guys, because we have this conversation to ourselves all the time, and we're just always like, oh my God, that's just like my, and you wouldn't initially think that our two kind of careers had a synchronicity, but they absolutely do. First of all, the fear is never always going to be with us. Our job is to learn how to manage it.
Yes.
And I don't think I wasn't taught how to do that, wasn't role modeled. Alcohol was the answer to my fear. That's why I drank alcohol. And I drank alcohol because the fear of with the call of the self. Like, I couldn't answer the call of myself when I was a teenager. Yeah. All I wanted to do was fit in and belong.
Yeah.
So there's a balance here, isn't there? There's a balance of belonging. The belonging part is so important. Like, I didn't belong, and that trumped everything. I desperately wanted to belong, so I used what vehicles were available to me, which was alcohol and drugs, because then I had a gang and a crowd, and we did a thing, and I belonged to that. It became part of my identity, but it was what drove that, oh my God, my mind is just fucking blown, is the fear of the calling of the self. And I just, we could, this is a whole, I don't want to go down this avenue, but like, just being a teenager, like, there's so many obstacles that you have, because so much of it is creating this identity, and belonging is so important to young people. And somewhere in all that, and then the being a woman, there's somewhere in that process the self gets lost.
Yes, absolutely, it does. Or I would say muted as well, like you say, the call of the self, and you can't answer that call because you're muted. And people are muted in different ways. Yes. I think that once, I prior to starting my mentoring practice, I didn't notice people who have these desires to create. I didn't operate as a woman musician. I didn't think of myself in those terms. I used to get irritated in interviews when I was asked, who's your favourite female singer-songwriter? Because I'm like, well, you wouldn't ask Van Morrison who's your favourite male singer-songwriter. Is being female a genre? Well, which annoyed me, but it turns out kind of is, because women are not making their music. So I'm just saying this because I was just enjoying myself, touring and being what I am, which is an artist, making a living, a really good living, creating music and doing it. And only recently have I tapped into all of these people. I mean, literally hundreds of women that I've worked with in workshops and mentoring packages and everything, who have this struggle. And now it really, really, really affects me. I want to get them out. It matters to me enormously. It matters to me that 95% of the songs we listen to are by men. Why? Well, songs are one of the main ways we interpret the world around us, the way we lament, the way we celebrate, the way we party, the way we communicate mixed feelings and hard things. And at the moment, they are written by guys, and women are dancing to that tune. They are, you could take it further and say songs and poems and books and all this stuff are like cartographies of meaning. How do you particularly people who don't have a religious practice or faith. How do you be good? How do you know what to do with yourself? How do you become the hero in your own story or the heroine? You know, it's actually, I can't think of anything bigger that matters more. And for next generations, for the stories that they're going to inherit, I want to pull them out of women, basically.
Because the experience of being female is so very, very different to the experience of being male. And we need so many more women's stories.
Yes.
Because it helps us, you know, I'm thinking through history, the few little bits and bobs, you know, just the few little, you know, Virginia Woolf or Mary Wollstonecraft, or, you know, just these little bits and bobs, you know, all the characters in Shakespeare, you know, were perceived by a man. And
yes. And very, he did a bloody good job of it as well. You know, some of them brilliantly written. But you mentioning there Virginia Woolf, I would also, as an aside, I think that, actually, this is not my observation. It's a woman called Kasia Urbaniak, and she talks about how in our culture, men are defined by what they do and women are defined by who they are. And when it comes to women artists, household name artists, I'm not talking about, of course, there's artists out there who are women, but I'm talking about creative powerhouses who exist in the popular imagination of most people who are, you know, reasonably educated. They're usually women who have severe mental health problems, suicidal tendencies, and are in some degree of pain, albeit physical or mental. I'm thinking here Sylvia Plath, her suicide, Virginia Woolf, her suicide, or even Frida Kahlo, who's arguably the most famous visual artist ever. You know, in horrific pain her whole life. And I feel like the story that we take from that is, if you are a woman and you express yourself, there's a cost. There is a cost, and you are not going to be good mother material. And one of the ways that I've noticed this, as I'm still playing with this idea and observing it, is that most people don't know, for example, that Ernest Hemingway committed suicide, that Kurt Vonnegut committed suicide. They don't, it's not the takeaway message about them as a person. Their work is. With women artists who kill themselves, that is the thing that you know. People don't know Sylvia Plath's poetry. They know that she put her head in an oven.
Yeah.
While her children were asleep upstairs. So you be an artist, you're a bad mother. And that's part of the fear and terror I sense in a sort of collective radio signal. Is like, you do this, you get so obsessed with your own creativity, it's going to be at the expense of things that make you a woman, make you a human being.
I just read a book which I think you'd love called Liars by Sarah Munguso. I'm not getting her name right. It's recommended to me by a friend, and it's a story of two artists. She's a writer and he's like a visual artist and filmmaker, and her career does better. And they have a child, and how that completely, like, he doesn't share the equal responsibility for that. And how it completely derails her. It's really, and it's exactly what he gaslights her into thinking she's mad. It's everything that you just described. You have to read it. It's really good.
Wow.
I'll send you the link. Liars, Sarah Mungan. Yeah. Anyway, and it's written in a really interesting prose as well. It's kind of almost a stream of consciousness. It's great. So tell me, like, we both became mothers pretty late in life. We were, what were we doing? Because we were not getting our shit together is what we were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was drinking, getting sober. You didn't have an alcohol problem. We were, I don't know what we were doing. We were doing stuff. And
like, I had a divorce when I was,
you did.
Which was me doing that. I'm not saying it's something that happened to me. God, how old was I then? I got divorced
That
when
was in your 30s.
early 30s when my first record
Yeah.
came out. I also have endometriosis, which has affected my fertility, and I was advised by doctors that I wouldn't, I'd find it extremely difficult to ever conceive and carry a pregnancy. Yeah.
And then I had my first child at 38.
Mm.
And then you called me when you were 41 and went, I'm pregnant. And I went, and then 10 minutes later I was. So we both had children at age 42. How, tell me about balancing that, because for me, like, I mean, motherhood was something like, yeah, whatever, I'll do it one day, whatever. And then I had no idea how transformative it was going to be in my life and how pivotal and how hard.
I mean, for me, I think parents would often tell non-parents, you have no idea. You don't know what tired means. You have no idea about time management, busyness, the destroy, your whole sense of self is destroyed. And I remember thinking, yeah, speak for yourself. That ain't going to be me. I've always done my thing and I always will do my thing. And they were right and I was wrong, basically. And I think I've had elderly parents, I've had other responsibilities that are immense, but there's always a pause button that you can press fundamentally. And without that, the motherhood is like, it can eclipse your identity. And I had another issue, which is I am an extreme introvert and an only child, and I love being alone. And I did not identify as a mother. I never went to one yoga class, NCT class, nothing. And I remember my sister advising me, you really need women that you can talk to about all this. That's the last thing I wanted. I didn't want to go and hear about someone else's lactation experience or so-and-so sleep patterns. If I was not with my kid, I wanted my mind to be on things that fascinated me. I'm always bursting with curiosity, and my curiosity doesn't go towards these particular things. And I know that women, I do think that there is a metaphysical itch that gets scratched by having children. And that also galvanizes a new identity for women, and they get like they go to the right pram, and they want the kids to achieve all these certain things. You see it, the horrible yummy mummy tag that you get in Britain. I didn't have that particular feeling. I didn't feel like I needed to create meaning and legacy in the universe for myself when I became a mother. I absolutely adore my daughter. I can't countenance anything happening to her. And I am 100% devoted to making her experience growing up as a happy adventure, with security and curiosity. And it's wonderful. And it's taught me a lot. The identity of motherhood is something that never attracted me, didn't chime with me. I didn't really care about being a part of it. I mean, actually, the first time I ever went touring, my daughter was 3 months old, and I was pretty ignorant about everything. I'd lost my mother a few years before, so I really didn't have anyone to sort of give me the basics. And I went off with my band. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be in a hotel room alone and everything. And of course, my breasts were absolutely killing me. And I didn't know about that. So I had to go around trying to buy a breast pump with my band, which is like taking like 4 sulky teenage boys into chemists around asking for a breast pump. And
they're going like oh, looking everywhere but your breasts.
Before I went on stage, I was expressing my milk and kind of thinking, well, this is a new meaning of an artist expressing herself, But so yeah, I mean, it could have maybe done me it could have been kind of helpful for me to lean into that identity a bit more, but it just didn't It wasn't how I saw myself or what mattered to me particularly. In terms of me, I couldn't care more about my daughter, but it wasn't the way I inhabited the way I saw myself.
I find it really interesting. I've been curious about this for a while, that all my closest friends, and you are really my closest friend, but all like the other women that I am close to, and most of my clients are introverts, and I'm an extrovert. I find that really kind of fascinating. One day I want to understand why that is.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there isn't a reason, but like I'll do a group with women, and like usually majority of them are introverts, majority of them. Like there's a couple of extroverts, but it's never the other way around ever. And then friends, like I'll meet friends that I really connect with, and then they'll say they're introverted, and I'm like, that's just so interesting. Like,
although I don't know if some people who call themselves introverts really understand what they're talking about. They think that because they have a coffee alone for 2 hours, that makes them an introvert, you know.
Oh, you're the most introverted person I've met. And so can I describe your introvert
go on.
to you?
Go on, yeah.
I always describe it this way. You can get up on stage in front of 200 people, laugh, joke, hang out afterwards, network, do all the things. And then you want to go home and not speak to anyone for 5 days. That it's not that you want to just like, when I wrote my books, I would spend 3 nights in a hotel on my own to really do that deep dive. By the second night, I was beginning to feel sad and lonely. And I would go and get food, pick up takeout, and be like, hi, how are you? How's your day? Whereas I know if someone said go to a hotel room for 3 days, don't speak to anyone, you'd be like, that's joy. Whereas by the third day, I felt sad by the third day.
Yeah. This is
it's about where you get your energy from, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And for me as well, the knowledge that I'm not going to be interrupted rather than the hope that I'm not going to be interrupted is a very, very different feeling.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I love flying transatlantically. I'm like, no one can email me. No one can call me. I am a sovereign. I'm just like, I'm allowed to, I mean, especially if you're like, if you're thinking and you're creative, or, you know, for me, it's kind of like I go right to, I'm like deep sea diving. I go right to the bed of the ocean. And then if my daughter comes along and asks me a question, I have to come all the way back up again to the surface and then go back down. So yes.
And it's tiring going up and down. Whereas if you kind of just stay there for a bit, you could use your energy to just stay there for a bit instead of having to go up and down. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good metaphor. How do we solve this dilemma? You know, I mean, this conversation has been really interesting. And I think there are so many people in sobriety, but so many people who are also frustrated creatively. Hopefully it's clarified a few things for you. But for me, the standouts were the call of the self and the self-abandonment of women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to get from one side of this to the other, we just need to have the resilience to not rely on what we think are optics to other people, you know? I mentioned to you one of my other good friends who's a very well-known writer in the UK. Wrote to me the other day. She said, if I ever use #writerslife, I've been kidnapped and you need to save me. And she was talking about people who do that visual thing of like a frothy cappuccino on their book with a candle and #writerslife. It's like, well, you're not writing when you're doing that. You're imagining yourself being looked at as a writer. Oh. You ain't writing nothing down.
Yeah.
You're concerned about how you're viewed.
So to put this all together, you have to live your truth.
Yes.
There is no other way.
No.
To not live your truth is hard, and living your truth is hard.
Yeah, but it's a lot more fulfilling.
Yes. Not living your truth. Not living your truth just gets you more not living your truth, and it gets you further and further away from yourself, and that's hard. Living your truth is the journey back to yourself.
Yeah.
And is the becoming. And both these are hard, but the reward is in living your truth.
Absolutely.
And the jumping off place.
To live this one precious life in denial of your own truth and your own self is such a tragic waste. And, it's, if possible, if, anyone working with me or you or just listening to this now, please listen to the call of the self.
Yeah, there's no other way. Yeah. I cannot even, I don't think I'd be alive now. I can't, like you said, the 16-year-old self, I just cannot believe, I just feel so lucky, and my feeling of gratitude just continues to grow. And I think maybe your 16-year-old self, I wonder what would she think? Because I just want to say, Sarah's 5, it's not that you've released 5 albums. Critically acclaimed means very well-known critics in the world of music have reviewed this, and you get endless 5 stars. That's what critically acclaimed means. I mean, putting 5 albums out into the world is impressive enough, but actually have them critically acclaimed. What do you think your 16-year-old self would say to that?
Well, oddly enough, when I wrote songs since I was about 3 or 4, and I didn't think it was a good thing to do. I thought it was naughty. And one day my mother picked me up from kindergarten, and she was driving along, and I was singing, and she said, "Honey, sing that song again to me." So I sang it again, and it was completely different. And she actually stopped the car and she said, "You're making that up as you go along, aren't you?" And I was terrified because she looked really serious. And I said, "I'm sorry," because I thought you should learn other people's. I don't know.
You're 4, yeah.
And she was gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked. And then I carried on, and then I realised that, I am allowed. Good, because I was already doing this. But I have to tell you, up until I was 18, it was a bit of a secret. Because I didn't have the identity of a singer-songwriter. It was the opposite. I'd written hundreds of songs, but I felt like, because I was in my little teenage world, I made a calculation that it would put people off me and freak them out. Especially boys. So I thought, if they find out how good I am on the guitar, they're not going to like me anymore. Now, it turns out I had that completely the wrong way round. But somehow I internalized it. And I didn't actually go out on a big stage until I was 18 years old. And I was with our other friend, Emma, and we were in Cincinnati, and I went on stage in front of a band that I'd seen opening for Bob Dylan. So it's quite a big baptism of fire. And that was when I was like, I can do this thing. People think I'm really great at this. And and that's the bit where identity can be really helpful, because I went from going, that's like a weird thing that I do in private, to then going, maybe I am this thing. And then knowing how to deal with it so that you don't get lost in the optics of it and lose the actual real source of gold, which is what it has been for me my whole life.
Yeah, source of gold. I love that. Source of gold. I want to do a little quick fire with you because I thought this would be fun, and I didn't warn you about that, so sorry.
Okay.
Favorite songwriter?
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I know the answer. Favorite album?
Ooh, it's hard. Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan.
Favorite song? I see a pattern here.
Oh my God. I'll do something left field. Because I was saying yesterday, in fact, this piece of music would be on my Desert Island Discs, and it is John Coltrane with Duke Ellington playing In a Sentimental Mood. Every time I hear it, it just doesn't get old. I just think I'm staggered. It makes me feel infinitesimal and in awe of their genius when I hear them play that song.
Favorite? Sorry, go on.
No, carry on. Favorite
writer, like of notebooks.
Favorite writer? Can it be a poet or novelist?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll say Caroline Bird.
Yeah, she's
Just
great.
had a great new book out called Ambush at Still Lake.
A favorite novel that you've read?
As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner.
Really? God, I remember reading that as a teenager. I read it because you read it and raved about it. Thank you so much. Tell people a little bit about what you do and where people can find you.
Okay. So obviously I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm mentoring. I have also been producing, arranging and producing a lot of projects, artistic musical projects in the last few years, and recording things and putting them out on my record label. So to find out more about that, you can go to my website, sarahgillespie.com, SARAH, and then Gillespie.com, or my other website, the createnowacademy.com, which is got testimonials from all the artists I've worked with, or some of them, and just check me out a bit more there.
I've listened to a lot of the people you've produced, and producing is like a whole thing that's opening up. Lots of artists in America and the UK, and it's great. It's introduced me to there's a couple of people that I can't remember their names, but a couple of people it's just been fabulous. All this new music that's opening up. Do you enjoy producing?
Oh yeah, I love it, and I kind of felt like it was a phantom job at first, because I'm like, I just sit here in the studio and say whether or not I like something. But I've taken to it like a duck to water, as you can imagine. No, I have a phenomenal team. Musical director Chris Montague, who plays with me and has co-written with me, has been with me on nearly every project. And I wouldn't be able to do it without him. And my engineer George Murphy, who's a Grammy Award winning engineer, and the studio we work in is a state-of-the-art studio.
Yeah.
So what I love is helping women take these songs, write the songs, finish the songs, record the songs, put them out into the world, and stop giving ourselves excuses. I'm allergic to excuses. So I'm like, do the thing. I can show you how. Here it is. Because the music industry feels like this magic world with an invisible door. And it's like, how do I get in? Where is it? And I'm like, here you go. I've just picked the lock. Yeah, come on. So that's how I got into production, and that's how I met my manager, Stephen Budd, who's like producing some household name producers, and I'm on his roster. So it's putting me in contact with some amazing artists, and I'm co-writing with different artists now, and it's all really, really exciting.
How many female music producers are there?
Not very many at all.
It's like 95% male. No, the music industry suddenly realised that's a problem.
Yeah, I don't have the data at all.
Yeah.
But I
remember you saying it's very high.
Yeah. But yes, and again, the thing is as well that studios are a male space traditionally. It's men that learn the engineering and the scale, and that is not all white patriarchy's fault. It's just that happens to be the reality. When you go into a studio, the drummers, the bass players, the engineers, the whole shebang is usually really male. And because women are often hardwired to be people pleasers, and particularly with guys, they often in a studio don't know how to articulate their desire, their happiness, their displeasure, whatever it is, their aesthetic judgment. So one of the things that I do when I'm in a studio is I checking in with the artist. And what I love more than anything is when one of the artists I'm working with says, no, I don't like that. I don't like that. Isn't what I wanted. I want it. What do you want? I don't know, but let's explore. It's like, yes, that's your artist self coming out and going, this is what, using their own desire and artistic passion as a compass rather than the like me behavior.
There's just so much in there to pull out that is going to be relevant for people's sobriety, and as we said, and you can see we can just continue to have this conversation.
Yeah, I know.
And at some point we have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you so much,
too.
Sarah. We will
Thanks for having me.
We'll put all of her information in the show notes, and you can reach out to me, enjoy the song. By the way, if you want to listen to the full version of the song at the beginning of the show, it's called Jasmine. If you put that into YouTube, Jasmine by Sarah Gillespie, it will come up. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you next week.